Okay, let's get things going. Okay, hopefully we can hear audio. Maybe? Yes, we can. Okay. Let's go ahead and post this in Discord. Okay. I don't know why that showed up differently. That's weird. I don't know what changed in Discord, but whatever. Okay. Right. Let's check our bit rate. I think that's looking okay-ish for now. Okay. So, what are we doing today? We're doing a couple of different things, but I think I wanted to spend a stream and talk about the changes that we made to the TOML parser and the config manager because I think it's important to understand how we're using that new parser. Because I didn't really go over that. I kind of did all the work off stream, and so I guess, or I did the majority of the work off stream. I did a little bit on stream. So let's kind of go over how I used it. I think that seems like a reasonable place to start. And then we're going to do something a little bit more exciting, which is a new feature in Fred, which enables us to kind of track file changes from outside of the editor. So, for example, if you're editing if you're editing a file with Fred and you're editing that same file with another editor, the idea is that if you save in one editor, it should be reflected in the other. And right now, it works with most editors that are not Fred, but it does not work with Fred. And I've mostly fixed that problem for now. So I'll show you essentially what I did, and then we're gonna go over um, some kind of like shoring up the feature and making it a little bit more usable for the users. And we'll go over kind of the scenarios for that later. But for now, let's go over our TOML parser. So in the config, right? So before what we had was we had a whole bunch of things in here that were, let's see. So before what we had is we would parse the config into this tree thing that was given to us from TOML plus plus, so we can kind of get an idea of what actually, you know what we can do instead? We can actually rewind the Git project to the point where I had that. So actually, let me look. So if I look at our log, um, let's go back to bump um, minor version, November, not this one, August. Okay, this is a pretty good one to go back to. So if I just kind of like check out this thing, we can kind of get an idea of what the TOML parser kind of looked like beforehand. So this was using TOML++, which is a fine library in its own right. However, it kind of doesn't do... I mean, it's good, but it's also like it does way too much. And I did not need the vast majority of the functionality that this library was providing for us. So if we look kind of at what the parsing routines are doing here, um, actually we can even go back. So if I do get checkout dash, right, we can go back to main. You'll notice also how Fred kind of just updated the file from underneath us, which is exactly like the feature I was talking about at the beginning of the stream. But point is, like, we can look at now the diffs inside of Fred between what it was with the TOML parser, with TOML++, and what it is now. So I'll go back here, actually. And if I go here, we can look at like what the diffs are. So here are the things that would have been essentially removed when I was there. Actually, let me snap to this, and then I will snap to where we are with Fred now. So if I look at this, right, so we destroyed stream. Let me make this kind of like a full screen experience. So we got rid of Toml++, we got rid of S-Stream, and S-Stream is just kind of like gross, right? The whole idea behind me doing a lot of the work in Fred nowadays is to get rid of the standard library wherever possible, and to be doing things like rolling a lot of my own data structures, rolling a lot of my own parsers, and basically going handmade all the way down and relying on as little like external libraries as possible, because I really want to just be solving the problems that I want to solve for Fred and doing them, very precisely with a lot of precision. So that's kind of the idea with this parser. And we can kind of go through here. So I had to add this thing called this load function. You'll see how this comes into play a little bit later. But you'll notice that I had to create this new config set thing. So what Toml++ gives you is it gives you this tree for every like config value plus so config values inside of actual tables have key and value stores. So if we look at like what the config looks like now, so here's the config, right? This little syntax here is actually for a table. Let me make the text a little bigger. So this thing is a table declaration, and it's the dot syntax is really just kind of hierarchical. So inside of the editor, like superclass, you have this like subclass called colors. It's like a sub object, and inside of colors we have this like set of keys and values, right? So what this thing does for us is oops, I kind of messed that up. So what this thing does for us, or what the library does for us, is it gives us that map, that like std map or std unordered map, whatever the implementation happens to be, of keys to values. So I'm replicating that with my own map structure here. So config message set gives us the mapping from like key right here, the string 8 value, to whatever the parse message was, which would actually be the value in this particular case. And so a lot of this code is really just setting up that map and making sure that we get all the keys and all the values that we need. So a lot of that's really just kind of, boilerplate code. The more interesting thing is in how we actually use it. So if I look at these actual save routines, these are kind of interesting. So, well, the save routines maybe are a little bit less interesting because that's just serialization. We actually I think we care a little bit more about the parsing side of it. The serialization, I was also using Toml++, and like incrementally building up the tree and then asking it to like stream out to a stream, which is why I included SS stream at the beginning there. But honestly, like this is all less important. The more important things are how we load Toml data structures. So let's kind of go down to the loading part. So here's loading, right? So whenever we had a color before, we'd have this thing called a Toml view, which is really just a node inside of that table. And then we look it up by name. So the name in this case is actually the key. And we try to extract out, hey, are you a uint32 value? And if you are, which is what this if is saying, we're going to go ahead and set the color here. You'll notice it's a little bit different. So what we actually have here is we get the parse message, which represents the value in this case, not the key. And that's important because like the key is computed a little bit differently, and we'll see that later. But we actually have the value here in the parse message. And then this void star is just a type erasure thing. But we're asking the same question, right? Are you any kind of integral? And if you are an integral, we're going to pull it out and parse it to a hex, a vec4f, which is our color representation. And then the same for a lot of these, right? So instead of having the key that we're looking for, we actually just have the value. So instead, so what we have here is that whenever we parse using this new parser, it's not building up the map that we're looking that has all the keys already indexed. It actually has the list of messages that are presented to us, and we have to look for the keys that exist inside of those messages. So we've inverted the problem a little bit. So instead of having the name that we're searching for, we have a key value, and we need to look for that specific key inside of our known data set. So anyway, that's kind of why it like turns into a little bit more of an interesting problem when you use this parser versus like that structured old parser that we had. But it does mean that we have to know what we're looking for in advance, which honestly is a thing it's a problem we had anyway. Like our config is well defined. Like I know exactly what the keys and values are. So actually having the map is a little less important from that perspective. So anyway, we kind of just go through and we load everything up here. The color highlights all work the same, right? It's just an array of stuff, and I can show you what that looks like in the config. So the way the highlights work is this syntax for a table of tables. And when you have a table of table, it acts sort of like a JSON array. So if I have like an array data structure like this, actually let me undo that. So if I have in JSON like my root level object, and inside this root level object I have an array, and inside of this array I have like a structure or like an object, right? And like 10 or something like that. And I can do something like that for these. So each one of these objects or like every entry in this array is just an object in and of itself. And this table of values is expressing exactly that concept, but just for TOML. So anyway, that's essentially how that works. And then everything else again is just tables of tables. Anyway, the point is like that's kind of like where we are for TOML parsing. And if I kind of go down to loading, right? So I shifted the problem a little bit to where whenever we come across these parse messages, we're going to look for this specific name, or sorry, we're going to match the name to whatever the config message name is. And if we find it in the map that we create locally, then we're going to go ahead and fill in this object here. That's essentially how it works. So before we were sending the object down and asking, hey, do you have this name in your map? And then we fill it in. But here we're passed in a key and a value, and we're asking the question, hey, is this key match this particular value? And we go through that list in order. But anyway, it's kind of an interesting inversion of the problem. Yeah, and all of this is really just mostly the same kind of thing. But I took out basically all the STL stuff from the config object itself. So there's no like std string or anything like that, which is actually kind of an interesting problem in and of itself. So like for these top level objects, let me actually kind of show you what the config dat looks like. So config dat, it's like this giant structure of stuff, right? So it's like a bunch of vec4s, a bunch of bools. But the more interesting things are where we actually have to allocate stuff, like these strings, for example. And those strings live on their own arenas. So I pool all of these strings together so I can group them and move them whenever I need to. So as like these are being set throughout the system, I can like regenerate, or like I can clear out that arena and make room for the new version of this string essentially. And that does happen whenever I reload the config as well. So anyway, just a lot of kind of interesting stuff. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. If I end up extending this Toml parser or like what's going to end up happening there. But I think there's going to be some interesting things happening. Why is this thing? I feel like my output is not resizing properly, but okay. I think that looks fine, probably. Hopefully. Okay. So what are we going to do today? We're going to make some more progress against the feature I was talking about. So buffer manager, right? So in this, let me give you an example actually of the feature actually working as intended. So let me see like arena, for example, .cpp. So when I have something like this, did I actually close that? I did apparently. Okay, so if I notepad, stars and arena, bring notepad over here. Normally what you'd expect to have happen is if I delete like this include here, for example, you won't see it appeared here because I haven't saved anything. But if I save it and then I go to Notepad, you'll notice that it's gone, right? So like Notepad updated in the background to say like, oh, like there's been a file. This file has changed on disk, so I'm gonna go ahead and update the reference for you. And if I get these two kind of like side by side like this, we can see how the changes propagate from one to the other. So if I kill that include, for example, and I go back over here, Notepad has already updated to delete that piece of text. I can delete OS, for example, and I look at Notepad again, boom, there it is, right? So like Notepad works as intended. However, old Fred did not. So if I undo all of these changes and I save again, we should see Notepad update. So let's try and do the opposite. Let's remove some stuff inside of Notepad and see how they impact Fred. Right, so if I save, Control S, and look, it updated. And if I delete all these things and save, boom, look, that updated inside of Fred too. And what's even better is like this is all tracked inside of the undo graph. So if I open up the undo graph, I can see the diffs that were applied as the other editor was making changes to this buffer or to the underlying file, really. So like we saw when we deleted these inside of Notepad. We saw when we deleted, CAssert inside of Notepad, and then we go all the way back to the beginning of the file. So I can go back here in Fred and save, and then here it is. Boom. That's fantastic. Super, super awesome. And I'm really excited to actually have that. Like I qualify it as a bug because it is a bug. Like editors are kind of unusable if they don't track file changes, right? I think. So I'm pretty excited, but you'll notice that there's something kind of missing in all of this, which is that if I make a change, if I go like hash include like foo.h, something like this, and then I go and remove this line here, and I save that, what happens is you see in Fred, it says the buffer for this couldn't be saved or it couldn't be updated. So we skipped making changes for this, which is intentional. Like we don't want to lose unsaved changes. That's what this little red star means. And actually I updated the undo graph to show like normally what you would see is a green node in here. And the green node indicates where the last save was. So if I go back to the original file and I save this, let's get that updated, and I look at the undo graph, you'll see that there's a green node here. This green node means that that's where we save the file. And it's just kind of a helpful thing if you're navigating around the graph and you're like, where the hell is the save, right? Like, oh, it's right there. That's kind of a useful feature. But the thing is that the saving, like, the fact that I do this, foo.h, and save, or sorry, actually, let me undo that. So save. hash include foo.h, right? And it's unsaved. We're in an unsaved state. And I make a change over here. And I save. Okay, we get this message. However, there's no way to, right now, in Fred to rectify this situation. What you want is you want something in the UI where you hit a button and it basically reverts you to whatever is on disk. So you can discard your active changes and take all the diffs from the file that file that is on disk. Because right now there's no way to be like, oh, I just want to like reload arena.cpp, right? Like I don't care about this foo thing. But if I undo, I'm still in like an unsaved state because it doesn't really reflect what is on disk anymore. So we're going to be working to fix that problem right now. That's what we're going to do. And I think what I want to do, just kind of sketching it out, is you see this little icon here that's the C++ icon. I think what I want to do is I want to change that icon to be the little warning symbol. Like this. I want it to be this icon if the file has unsaved changes, but the file on disk has changed. So that's basically the concept, right? Like that is what I want to have happen after I make this change. Okay, so let's make sure we're clean. Okay, so yeah, there's no git changes right now. I just kind of check in both places, because I don't get colored text inside of Fred yet. So that's kind of what we want to do. So in order to, so let me show basically the logic that's applying to make this happen. So apply diffs. So there's this thing. In order to make this happen, I have this concept of a file tracker map that is asynchronously being updated as Fred is being executed. And you can tweak how frequent that update is based on this config value down here. So I added this async update frequency milliseconds. This tells the system how frequently we want to check, like for file changes on disk. That's really all it's checking for right now. Do you add externally? I do. Well, that's kind of the problem I want to start with right now. But to kind of answer your question, if the file is in a save state like this and I make external changes, the undo graph does reflect that. So I can show you an example of that actually in the config itself. So in the config, I can do like show line numbers and I can change that from the config. So if I uncheck this, you'll see that flipped to false right there. And the buffer is still in a saved state. So I can look at my undo graph and we see that this one is now green because that's what updated on disk, right? So it does exactly the thing you want it to do. It still keeps it in a save state. It just synchronizes the underlying buffer. So that is all working. The thing that is not working, however, is providing a way in the UI to click a button and take the on disk changes. Let me actually show line numbers again because that's the thing I like. Hey, how's it going? Yes, and of course, welcome Ratchet, welcome Piggy Bank. Good to see you guys. We're solving some file synchronization problems today. It should be fun. Right, okay. So we can define how frequently this file changed map, or like this file tracker map is updated asynchronously. And then we check that using a couple of heuristics, but it's very efficiently checked. And so once we get into a state where we know something on disk has changed, we go through this function that's apply external file changes. So after we find the mapped buffer that has changed on disk, we add it to this list here. And then we take that list and we feed it to this function over here. And all this is doing is this constructs a temporary file buffer for us and runs the diff algorithm on it. And then we take the result of that diff algorithm and just apply the diffs directly to the buffer that has basically changed on disk. So that's kind of the very short version of how this is working under the covers. But when the buffer isn't saved and it's edited externally, it should also be added to the undo graph. The thing is, like, we don't know where it's going to be added to the undo graph, because those, like, I mean, you could add like a future node or something like that, but I don't necessarily know if that's the correct decision, because maybe there's a version of this file where you want to branch off and then you want to load the file from that diff and go forward from there. So I very intentionally made this decision. You can root it at the previously saved state. Let me think about that. Is that what we want to do? I'm not sure. Because then that gets you in a situation where you have some continuous stream of edits where, so if I'm thinking about this from the perspective of Git, and I have like a branch point at the last save, I suppose we could do that, but I think it like, the thing I want to have happen is I want the user to be very much aware of the fact that the file changed on disk, and I want them to opt into whatever that is. I don't want the system to kind of like ad hoc, like generate this diff somewhere in the undo graph and you have to like navigate to it manually. So user can diff with it. But that's kind of like what I want to do. So like if they click this button, whatever button we come up with, if they click that button, what it would do is it would go through the same process, and basically it would take what's on disk and diff it against the current buffer, like the current snapshot that we have, and then generate a new node that has all the diffs between those two things, and that would be like whatever the save point of the file is currently. So you can still diff between where you were and what the file is on disk. It's just like on the same plane of edits as you were previously. Yeah, so I mean, it still does add that new node for the diff, which is I think what we want. I still have to play around with it. But let's but yeah, I basically wanted to make it so where the user manually opts into this thing, because I don't want to just like generate a node and have it like be kind of hidden in the UI, and then maybe, I don't know, if you click this button it would take you to that snap point. I don't know, that kind of feels a little bit weird. Press space to keep local changes. Yeah. That could be kind of a fun little mini game or something like that. It's like all your work will be lost. Yeah, I think I have to mess around with it. So I want to try this system of manually having like opting into the changes first and just see how that feels. Yeah, I want to add it. It has to be explicit, because my experience with other editors is that the on disk changes are always explicit. You have to opt into them if you have unsaved changes in your buffer, because you're making an intentional decision to either like take what's on disk or like accept what you currently have in your buffer and then like overwrite whatever the source was at some point. So let me experiment with that and see how that works, or see how that looks essentially. Okay, so right now here's our else case for when we have unsaved changes and we skip the file update. So what we want to do is we probably want to set some we probably want to set a property on the actual buffer here that says, hey, you know, this file is associated with some file on disk, and that file on disk no longer represents what you have in your buffer. So that will give me the information I need to create an icon somewhere and like make it clickable so that I can run back through this logic and kind of like apply it if they actually click it. There's a third scenario here, which is where the file no longer exists. So say you're editing a file and it's deleted from underneath you, like someone did a git checkout or something like that. That's a little bit of a weirder scenario to be in because it sort of invalidates all of our assumptions around like how saving would work. If you try to save a buffer like that, the directory structure may not be the same at all. So I think what I want to do is like if they push save in that scenario, they're prompted with like, oh, give me a path to save this to, essentially. But I need to think through that. Um, let's solve this problem first and then come back to that a little bit later. Let's see. So we have this. Let's go to buffer or Gesundheit. Or actually, our local buffer is actually in here. So register buffer. Here we go. So we have this ref count thing that tells us when we can actually delete this guy. I think what I want to have now is I want to have like a maybe like a bit set actually. So if I have something like and I make this like a right now a UN64T is fine because everything in here is basically the size of a pointer, and I want to put it like down here like buffer properties. Properties, none. And I'm gonna have some bit set stuff in here. And none is gonna be 0. And we probably want this bit set property for 1U0, something like that. Which is kind of weird. Like, I've always thought this is kind of weird when you bit shift, like, by 0, it ends up being 1, but, you know, that's just bit manipulation for you. Let's do this, make it explicit. Okay, so now we have this properties that we can set whenever this thing changes. So I can do something like down here. So and buff and then external file change, something like that. Now the question is, when do we actually flip this bit to not be there? Because we don't want this to be sticky, like, ever, essentially. And I think what we end up doing is that whenever this buffer is saved, which I have a hook for, whenever it's saved, we essentially clear this bit. And I think I have enum utils. I think I have like an unset bit helper. Yeah, remove flag, right? I have remove flag, which just does, it's just nice to have this in text. So I'll go ahead and use that whenever we save. Save buffer saved, here we go. Okay. Move the, so we've saved the buffer. You probably want to use ULL as a postfix. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, most compilers will basically yell at you once you start to overflow, but yeah, having it be consistent, I think, is much more important. Yeah. I know MSVC. I actually interesting piece of info here. I actually implemented a warning that tells you whenever you overflow this stuff inside the compiler. So if you end up having like if you end up having a bit shift value or any kind of value that appears on this right hand side, and the enumerator is too small to handle it because of the underlying type, the compiler will issue a warning about that. Ideally, I would love it to just say, your code can't be compiled because realistically, that's just going to be a bug waiting to happen. But, backcompat being what it is, you have to do it as a warning. Okay. So we've serialized it. Okay, we're good there. So buff, and then equals remove flag. And this takes in, again, the E and the flag. Okay. Buff. And then we want to remove external file change. There we go. So we should be able to build this. Or actually, we got to probably just do a normal build. Okay, cool. That compiles. I haven't made any terrible mistakes yet, so let's just kind of see how this works. So kind of thinking through this, now that I have this property that's reliably set and unset whenever file saves happen, I want to make sure that we can get a piece of UI showing up whenever we have like this buffer unset state happen. So let me go over to the layout. So the editor layout is what's responsible for like all these panels and all of the tabs and stuff, and basically doing all this logic that like lets you rearrange tabs and panels. But this is where we're going to stick the piece of information that tells us whether or not or that tests to see if we need to change the icon there. So let's go ahead and expose this through the interface, because in Buffer Manager, we expose everything through this like shared buffer thing. Since it's kind of like, so the registered buffer is sort of like type erase, like the implementation detail of this is hidden behind the CPP. So realistically, none of the consumers can have access directly to this thing, which is kind of how I want to keep it, because this is the thing that's actually ref counted, and is responsible for like destroying the refs and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and add a bool, and we're going to call this, actually, wait a second. Yeah, bool, or external file changed. Do I want to call this external file changed? Yeah, I think that's fine. Because in cases where the file changes and we're able to update the buffer right away, this is kind of just like, oh, we're already in sync with the external file. So like this should always return false in those cases anyway. I think that's a reasonable name. So it's kind of let's kind of go back to that. Line guides. Okay, cool. So we have this. So buff. Oh, actually implies buff properties. External file change. Cool. So we have this now. So we have a way to query it. Now we just got to get like the layout manager to do it. So if I do like build panel, actually tabs. Is there a floating tab one that does this stuff? So build panel tabs is where we actually want to insert this stuff. Okay, so I do the leaf and the non-leaf panel here as well. So whenever you take this tab out and it's floating like this is what's considered kind of like a non-leaf widget. And I build that all in the same routine. So all the pieces of code that we need here should be anything we need to change is going to be inside of this actual piece. So process input. I think what we want to change. I want to keep this here, but let's move that over there. So we render the file name, right? That's fine. I want to render the icon. Okay. The thing that's going to get annoying a little bit about this is that our thing for if I actually just do CL like BV, for example, this icon here is not it's not an image in the way that it wants to be consumed here. This thing is actually a it's a rasterized glyph to our glyph atlas. So I can't use this same code if I want to render the actual icon. So I think maybe what needs to happen here is that I have a button. So we probably want it to be positioned in the same spot. However, I would skip doing all of this and probably have like a separate step down here that's like, if, if this thing has changed, I want to, instead of doing all this, I'm going to take that position and emit this little icon instead. Or actually, I could do it as part of the file name because this is what we want. I think this may actually make a little bit more sense. It may actually make a little bit more sense to do it this way. Yeah, I think this might make more sense. But let me make sure that the tab has the information we need. So in our tab, it's a tab layout, right? This thing? Let's see. This is why I need to get go-to-def. Panel tabs, yeah. The tabs are tab layout things, and we have a pointer directly to the editor that matters. So I can get the buffer, or I can get the register buffer from the editor and then ask this question, essentially. Okay. Okay, this should be fun. Let's go back to this thing where we're rendering the file name. So I think making it part of this makes the most amount of sense because that icon is it's a glyph. It's not that thing. Let me make sure the position is what we want it to be. So tab visual offset. So the icon, where does the icon get positioned? Drag tab width. I know we offset it by the position somewhere in here. Sorry, I do not need these things. I don't know why the mod tools are always like hidden by default. There we go. So we render the text. How are we offsetting here? I think maybe we just end up offsetting this thing, actually. Right, so we move it over. I'm just making sure I got this right. Let's first get the piece of information that we need. File dirty, and we can have something like tab. Wait, we're actually iterating through each of the tabs here. So this needs to be computed per basically. So we need to make it. We basically need to have like the same logic inserted in each of these, since we're going through and like batch doing all of these things here. Sorry, I'm basically paging in how I did this, because all this code was written like months and months and months ago, which is why I have like some it's why I have like some commented out code here. Actually, I can delete that because it's kind of pointless. Okay, this is how I'm doing it here. So I get the tab size, the width size, and I'm subtracting that from the entire button size. So the button size is computed elsewhere. And I probably do the same thing down here, if I had to guess. I probably clip it, or maybe I just kind of like stick them there. Yeah, I kind of just stick it there. Like the position X gets it doesn't need like this computation. This is the thing that's actually getting us making the file name match up here, because we're kind of positioning the file name in between this icon, the C++ icon, and between the X button here. So instead of doing this calculation, if the tab is dirty, then we basically say, hey, no. So let's actually compute that here. Spool file dirty tab.editor, and then I think the editor shared buffer. I thought there was a way. Register buffer. There must be a way to do this. So maybe I just need to add a helper here as well. I probably need to add a buffer or a helper here as well, because there's a lot of indirection happening here, since the editor refers to a buffer, but the buffer is actually what holds all of the information. However, when we're dealing with the UI deals in editors, not in buffers, because the editor is kind of like driving all the behavior from the UI to the buffer. So I actually do need a little bit of indirection here. Buffer manager H. What did I call it here? External file changed. I want this. And I want to put you here. External file changed. So then I want to go into add CPP. I want to go to this thing because I like putting I like making things in order, or like having the declarations in order. So this one's gonna follow from this one here, and we're gonna have you here. And then do I have like a buffer? So we get the way to, oh, we have the data share buffer. So we can return data and then external file changed. Kind of just forward that call along. That's what we want. Okay, so now we have a way to query it from here. This should compile. Build only compile. What did we make? Okay, it's just a warning saying that we're not using it. So everything else compiled, which is what we care about. So if the file is dirty, we basically don't want to offset it in this way. We want to offset it in a different way. So how can I take out basically tab button size, icon size? So I want to multiply this icon by not dirty, essentially, which will shift the text over. And that's exactly what we want. Not file dirty. This is just kind of like a little bit of a hacky way to make sure that we don't factor in this X or like this the icon size, because I'm basically going to shift the file name over by whatever the width of this thing is instead. So we can actually test this out real quick. Okay, so if I run Fred, let's open up like a test.txt here. So what I want to have happen is that if I make an edit here, right now we have the icon of text. That's what this thing represents. So if I make a edit in the other Fred on this file, let's say I move the B down. Okay, cool. So it shifted the text over, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. So that is working properly. That's good. Okay, cool. And so position X 0, that's what we want. So now what I want to have happen is I want to render this. So if file dirty, I know I have to do a branch here, which is kind of annoying, but I think it's actually, it might actually be unavoidable in this case because I want to be able to call the render glyph function instead of being able to do it. I have to be able to like optionally render the glyph and move our position forward. And I don't know if I can do that branchless unless I get funky with some like function call that wraps this thing. Yeah, it just gets a whole mess. So I'm not going to quite do that for now. Yeah, I think I just kind of have to have a branch at this point. Glyph icon render glyph no offset, render icon glyph no offsets. So let me see what the parameters this thing look like. So we give it we obviously give it our list. So this list is just the draw list. Warning. I think what do we have? So we have a whole bunch of special glyphs that are built in. These are for various different icons that you'll find around Fred, and one of them is the warning icon. That's what we want. And that's what we want right here. So we want to... Do I have a reference to the colors structure? Do I have a reference to the colors? Widget colors, that's what we want. Is that in here? Are we given this as a parameter? Looks like it's further up. I know I could search for it, but okay, good. Yeah, widget colors is what we want. So if I look at the config editor and I look at widget, we have this warning color that's here. That's what we want. Okay, so widget colors, warning. That should give us what we want. However, we need to still offset based on this thing. But pos.x plus equals this thing dot x. This returns a position of like where the advance of this thing needs to be. But if I build this, let's see what we get. File dirty. Did I call it something else? Oh. File dirty. Okay, so let's try this again. Test.text. So I'll make some edits, and then I'll make an edit and save. Okay, so here's our icon. It's way the heck down here because we didn't offset it correctly for, we didn't, since we said no offsets, it's not taking into account the vertical offset of what the actual glyph is. So we need to take that into account. Let's go ahead and do that. And I can use that no offsets. I can see basically how that's calculated down here. So the position, is there only 2 of these? Okay. I gotta remind myself of basically how this thing is used. So the position of this thing is calculated based on this. I think this X is correct. It's still a little bit like not really taken into account. So if it is dirty, we basically don't want to take this icon size into account, which is what I want. However, for some reason, it's not like shifting over, but I think that's a problem for a separate pass. Why is this glyph not being positioned properly in the Y direction? Because I think I need to measure it. Yeah, so I get the glyph size from this thing, and that tells me the height. So I think I need to get that down here. So glyph size. Warning. That's a weird bug. Need to fix that later. And so, so position. And then we're going to go ahead and just update this to be warning glyph position. So warning glyph position needs to have like this little calculation kind of taken into account here. So I'm just gonna steal this code here, put it in here, indent it, and we're gonna paste that here. Tab size, tab button size. This the position X should already be taken into account. So we don't need that. But this thing, so I think this just needs to be width over 2 actually. And then its Y position is explained here as well, so I'm going to steal that. And this is what's responsible for actually centering the glyph itself. So let's take this, put that there. It should give us what we want. What are we doing? Glyph position X width. Oh, it's because it's glyph size dot X. And this is Y. I'm glad that I'm glad that gave me an error, because that would have been a really annoying thing to debug with all these local variables. I was thinking about switching this to be kind of a bunch of different little functions, but having one function here has just kind of been working really well for me, because I kind of have all the local context, but then it also means that you get like local variable pollution that happens every now and then. You got to worry about that occasionally, but it's fine. And because these widths, this width and height were actually coming from this stuff here. Okay. So let's do this again. Make an edit. Test text. Okay. So our position in the Y direction is wrong. Why is this wrong? It's like not just a little bit wrong, but it's a lot of bit wrong. And also the X position for the test is super wrong. I think we actually need to be, let me fix this. So our X position is super wrong. Why is this super wrong? This moves it further to the right. Ah, okay. Okay. I was actually doing this factoring totally incorrectly, because the tab size, right, we want to take away from the button, but then we also want to but then the icon size. Okay, so this calculation is just straight up incorrect, even with this mutation here. Because I thought this was taking away the icon size and like shifting it over more to the left, but what it's actually doing is it's taking away this button width, this tab button width, which is actually this thing here, and taking that away. But we actually need to keep moving it over this way. So I think what this needs to be doing is this needs to be subtract, or it needs to be multiplying by whatever this thing is times a negative value. So no, it's still wrong. It's still wrong. It needs to be 1 or 0, basically. which to do branchless is kind of annoying. Because then that means I need to like index into a 1 or 0 array thing. It needs to either add this or take it away. Because if I add it, then it will move further this way. But if I take it away, it'll move it back. What if instead I do like... or it's equal to... I know this is adding a branch. So if the file is dirty, I want to make it -1, else I want to make it 1, right? This does add a branch, but that's fine. So if it's -1, this will be negative, and it will instead be added to this thing, and we'll take that away from the width and shift it over further. Yeah. Yeah, I can that would be dipping into the intrinsic funness. And ideally it should optimize down to that. I hope. That'd be fun to take a look at the code gen for this. I might do that at some point. Oh, I'm actually running the other version. Okay. That's why. Okay, so let's take a look at this again. Let's make an edit. I know this debug loop is actually kind of annoying because it requires me to actually like modify a file, save it, and then like look at the other version of Fred. Okay, so the test, our test is still in the wrong spot for some reason. Well, actually, no, it's in the right spot. It is in the right spot, the text is, because it's taking into account this this glyph width now. The Y value of the glyph itself is incorrect. So that's the only thing we need to solve now, which is good. So to center that thing, there's another calculation I need to take into account. So we have the glyph width here, the tab button size. Why is it not getting centered? Oh, because I'm adding it? No, that should be fine. Let me see what my other piece of logic is doing here. So we take the same position. Tab button. Why is our Y so jank? Oh, because I already take it into account here? Oh. It needs to be the base position, Y position. Okay, so instead of this, I'm going to do it Y plus that thing. That's what needs to change. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's modify it like that. Okay. Now it's gone? What? Oh, it flew off because I got it backwards. Yep. Yep, our icon is completely out of nowhere. It's completely out of there now. Yeah, it needs to be like pre this calculation here. Oh, okay. This is getting annoying. I really need to switch this to flex style layout engine instead of having like these arbitrary positions. So I kind of got to the point where I've been I've been generating like a lot of these positions manually, as you can see, and you keep continuously running into these problems where I can't lay out text and buttons and things very easily without a whole bunch of like mental overhead to do this. I really just need to eventually rewrite the entire layout engine of Fred, which is gonna be a huge task, but it will be so much easier once I get that done. Because then I won't be hitting these problems consistently where I just want to add like a tiny piece of UI, but it's like there's a lot of gymnastics involved because of like how manual a lot of the calculations are. Yeah, so in this particular case, the tab button size is not what I want. I actually just want to offset because this has already been factored in. The tab button size is already factored in up here, right here. So all I need to do is offset by the actual glyph size itself. This should work. Okay, so let's try this again. So let's add some stuff and test it. Okay, that's kind of almost in the spot that we wanted to. It's not quite. Still off screen. Why is this? Why are you off screen? So we have the tab size factored in. Oh, is it because the tab padding is in there? I'll bet that's because the tab padding is in there. Because this glyph, since there's no offsets applied to it, it basically needs to be exactly at the point that we need it to be. Yeah, I think I end up something like this. Because this should rise it up. Because I always render up, adding in the Y position means that I'm going to be lowering the item. So if I take away from the Y position, it means I'm raising it up. And I think that this padding is just about exactly where it needs to be. So let's try to build actually. Edit. Oh, come on. Oh, I got it backwards. Of course I did. Oh, I invert it for the freaking tab layout. Oh, see, it's problems like this that I just need to get rid of completely. This needs to be added. Okay. It's getting closer. But it's still not quite where I want it to be. Why is it... Is it because... So the text baseline should be down here. Again, we're rendering upwards, so whenever I move the text base down, Or I move it up by that padding bit. Why is this not working? Our tab size plus the height. And we're moving it up. Hmm. Yeah, it's been a while since I've had to like page in a lot of this information, which is why I'm like getting stuck more than I rightfully should be. So this baseline is specifically for this thing to render correctly. So it's already set for this. Let me kind of rebase my understanding here. Let me figure out where this thing is being placed first. Okay. So let's take a look at this. Actually, you know what? To make this faster, I'm just always going to render this thing. So basically, let's just set this to using one of the private Unicode code points. If you can render the glyph as part of the string, then you can prepend it the glyph. Yeah, I probably could do that, but then that kind of the way the underlying text engine works is that the underlying code points are always trying to pull from a specific font. So once we identify a code point that belongs to that Unicode glyph, then that is the font that gets loaded. The way that these special glyphs work is they're my own custom font that actually kind of has like a fake Unicode code point associated with it. So like I'm kind of like sidestepping a little bit of that behavior. But like maybe I could encode that in the string, but then it also means I have to mutate the string with this weird Unicode code point value. That may or may not work. Because it may work in the sense that I could get the code point or I could get the glyph there, but it might not be in the right position. That's the thing that might make it a little weird. Anyway, I can render this now. Okay. Okay, so there's our baseline. That's basically like where it's getting, or like where it gets rendered when there's no like height to it. So I think actually if I do this, let's see where the height gets me. Let me get rid of all this actually. Let's get rid of all this and see where the glyph height gets me. And what I expect to see is I expect to see it like way above. Oh, yeah. So because the baseline was all the way at the bottom, there was no offsets being applied. Basically putting it at the right height of the text using its height is actually the exact right position for it. Okay, so there's that little fun piece of information. Well, anyway, it's in the right spot. Now we just gotta hide everything else. Let's not do this. Not even gonna bother commenting on that because this is what's pulling it down. This pulls the baseline all the way down to the bottom. I forgot that that's what this is doing. And then the tab padding is what pulls it up to make it like kind of make it so the text is floating upwards there. Okay, that's fun. So let's get rid of this. Okay. Eventually I need to add like probably some logic here to see whenever the mouse is hovering over the tab. Um, that's what gives us this hand. I'll probably add a tooltip that says, hey, you know, there's like reload the file, like click this tab to like reload the file or something like that. But I want them to be clicking the specific Unicode code button or the specific like Unicode thing there, if that makes sense. Okay, start image batch. We need to pull this in there. And if so, if the file is dirty, we're just going to continue. We're not going to bother doing this. Okay. Okay, let's make an edit. Okay, cool. That's roughly like what I want it to be. Maybe I need to push the X over a tiny bit. Yeah, let's push the X over a tiny bit. But it got rid of the icon, which is what we wanted. So this X position minus, do we want to subtract the tab padding here? Yeah, I think we want to do let's move the X of the warning clip over by just a tiny bit. Okay. Yeah, just so there's a little bit less visual space gap right there. And then the position will be X. We're going to add this thing. Cool. Just so we can get it back to where the text should have been prior to this subtraction here. That should keep the padding kind of looking a little bit nicer. And we can quickly test that out. Oh, the cats are being cats. Yeah, that looks much better with that little space there. That's perfect. Okay. So we have our icon that tells us the information. And I think eventually I want to turn this into basic iconic button, which allows us to capture like hover and click events and stuff like that. Let me make sure our basic iconic button, no offsets. Are no offsets allowed in here? You know, it's funny. I actually went through like all the effort of doing like the positioning very carefully inside of here. But if I end up just using the iconic button, it's gonna be like it's just gonna be doing the same thing, so it's whatever. Right. So what if I actually did do that? Like what if I actually just did use the iconic button instead of this thing? So we have this, it takes a whole bunch of parameters. So we have flags and the build button input. We want to set the padding to be this padding and no thickness, and then the icon size is computed for us. So if I do, let's actually experiment with this. And if I go into the layout engine, do I have basic button? Let's include basic button. I actually added this super nice feature to Fred, which allows us to sort lines of text, and I use that all the time for includes to just kind of keep them in the right order. So if I go sort selected lines, boom, look at that. Sorted everything. That's pretty cool. That is just a nice little feature of Fred now. And if we look at the includes, just to kind of make sure that they're in the right order or that we didn't lose anything, there it is, basic button at the top. Cool. Awesome. I love that feature. It's a great feature. So let's look at, there should be an example of using the iconic button actually inside of the simple command. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I want it to be the tab ID. Okay, so if I do something like, I don't think I need to push a clip for this, do I? I should already have a clip associated with this thing. I don't think I need to push a new clip. So if I do something like, yeah, we're gonna need this still. And I'll call it ICO size. And then let's copy all this stuff. Ooh, that came out janky looking. This is going to be the tab ID. I think the tabs have their own ID, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we do. So we're going to use this as the seed for this thing. This is going to be dirty file button. Special glyph. Warning. And here the position is going to be basically what this thing was. So position in the X direction. Okay, just do that. And then here is going to be just pause. Something like that. And then here it's going to be the tab padding. Okay. Let's actually just copy this whole thing. Let's make it a strike just so we can kind of see the outline of the button for now, but this is probably going to become a none option. State. Yeah, we have the state. Let's see what that does for us. What are we doing? Glyph size. Oh, that's because these are icon size. Okay. Whoa, what's going on here? Is that because... Oh, I actually did not... Well, first of all, the offsets are super wrong. And then I didn't offset the X position for the text down here. And I think that's actually captured inside of the button response. Yeah, the button size is in the button response. So if I do something like pause.x, x, something like that, that captures the button response, button size, something like that. Then I could delete this. But our Y position is super whack. That's because I need to get rid of that. Let's see where that gets us. Okay, that looks kind of right-ish. The Y position's still wrong. Why are you wrong? I think it's because the padding is like this. Because the padding is actually, I think it's, yeah, the padding's a vector 2f. So if I do X position and then in the Y we don't want any padding, let's see what that gives us. Okay, that levels it out. That's exactly what we want. The padding in the X direction, position X plus icon size X over 2. What if I actually just get rid of this? So I think its position is just getting pushed far too over to the right. Look at that. Our button is exactly where we need it to be. That's awesome. But let's actually color it too at the same time. And the way we color buttons is that we push a color palette onto the stack. So if you look at what source button, we pull the color palette out of here, and then we decorate the box. Wait, did it have a box? It should have had a box. Why is there no box there? Why is there not a box being drawn there? Is that because I set the color palette to be something that is nonsense? It should have been strike, right? There should have been a strike box here. Why is there no... So basic box is what's responsible for drawing the actual outline. So if I look at... Actually, maybe I set it in the color palette to not have stuff. Let's look. So I push a color palette. Only for the color panels, though. That should be fine. Okay. This is for the panels. But we get the current palette. Like, we're not changing it. Yeah, we get the current palette. So it should be fine. I don't know why this is not honoring the strike option here. Perhaps box. So when we strike it, we strike the rect with what color? Palette border, which is what I expect. But why do you not have a box around you? It's a little weird. It could be because the box is like just barely being shaved off by both the text. No, that's just weird. That's just weird. That should not be happening. Yeah. Well, I think I need to debug that separately because that's just a weird thing that's happening. But the thing we actually do care about is setting the color palette to be the right color. And we do that for the text. So for this, I can do something like current palette list. And so we could do palette dot palette text. Why does this return a pointer? Oh, it probably returns an immutable pointer. Yeah, that's why. Yeah. Actually, let's check our draw list. Ink. The API. Yeah, it returns a const color palette star because this thing it just has a whole bunch of vec4s in it, so I don't copy it if I don't need to. I only read from it. So we actually do want to copy from it because we do want to mutate it. We want to do the warning color from the and then we need to make sure that we pop it. List like that should work. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. That should give us the right color at least. Okay, it does. Except it's like modulated with that, but I think that's fine. I think that should be fine. Actually, let me open multiple tabs and see what that looks like. That's fine. That's fine. I keep saying that. It's fine. It actually is fine, though. Now I can actually just get rid of this. Like, all that work we did to make sure it was center is kind of all for naught because I can just use the iconic button, which already takes all that junk into account, right? That's kind of a nice feature of this, but it is what it is. So now we can see if, like, basically if clicked, right? If it is clicked, which it should be able to tell us that information. Do I have the feed inside of this function? I do have feed. Okay. Button clicked. Let's just queue up some info to make sure that it's receiving the mouse events we believe it is. Click, 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 click. It's not receiving mouse events because why? Because I suspect we ate the mouse event somewhere up here. Yeah, we did. We ate the mouse event further up. Right, because the way that this is layered is that it's like we create the rectangle for the panel or for the tab, and then this is what's receiving all the mouse events for this thing. So if I want this to get the mouse event, I basically need to move it up here. But what we can do is we can do it. Yeah, I basically need to make it so that the click can be handled by this specific little thing. So we have the close button widget. So if it's in this offset, right? That's how we end up setting it. So we have like these little IDs that designate specific little pieces of the UI. Okay, so we need to make another thing for this then. Icon ID. So if the focus widget, check for tab close. Let's look at what close ID is doing. Okay, so this needs to be factored into a couple of these other areas as well. So the idea is that if you middle click a tab, it also will try to close the tab, or it requests a close. Or t dot what's it called? I already forgot what I named this thing. Oh, this is basic button. Icon ID. Because we want to be able to offer that as well. So let me spread these kind of out a little bit. Something like that. So this whole this disjunction is all together. And then we need to make another ID for this. Icon. And we can get rid of that one we made up for a little bit. We made up for the button earlier. So we have that. We need to make a clipping rectangle just for the icon itself. So the it's equal to this stuff. It's the offset x minus that thing minus tab button size. I think we probably want the whole icon to be on the left-hand side. So basically, if they click anywhere in there, that's what we want. Yeah, we have an icon size and we have a tab button size. So we want it to be anywhere within that. But honestly, like, it's just going to be 0, right? Like, it's just this. And then the width of this thing is what's going to change. Is equal to width of, or actually not even a static cast. It's just going to be data icon size dot x. Yeah, we do need a static cast, it turns out, because you need to turn this into an integer. Okay, so if we have this, if do we have the tab? Okay. Tab or this is a external file change. That's the one. Cool. Yeah. Tab icon ID. Okay, we should have what we need to make this button work now. How badly did I mess it up? What's in here? Okay, nothing. No, huh? You're just gonna deny me that. Why are we not working here? Oh, right. Icon clip. There we go. It's funny that or I guess I didn't get an unused variable warning simply because I had used it on these two lines. So that's fine. Interesting. Still not working. Why? Tab size X. But in this case, we want to start from, so this is offsetting so that it starts over here, right? If I add all of the tab size, then it's over here. but subtracting that value gets us over here. However, for this icon, we want it to start all the way at the left-hand side, which is why it's 0. And we want the width of it to be the icon size. Am I calculating this correctly? That's the thing. Forget where this thing is calculated. Tab area height. Tab area height. That should work. Especially because we're using it to actually size the icon itself. Or like position it. Yeah, here, right here, exactly, right here. Button size X. That's strange. I'm not sure why it's not being factored in correctly for this calculation up here. This should be right. Oh, wait a second. No, that should be fine. I actually do want this to override anything else. Well, let's debug it, I guess. So let's go into icon ID. Yeah, so I'm not getting any of it right here. Weirdly. So is that because... So I get into the tab clip. Hot widget. Okay. What's our icon clip look like? Width is 24. Offset X is 0, and that's because that. $17. Because the offset Y is so, like, wrong? No, that should be fine. That should be totally fine. There's no another calculation that's happening here, right? Yeah, that should be fine. So what's going on here? What is happening? Let's check out what's going on inside here. Oh, wait. Oh, that's why, because literally this is just false. Okay. Well, shoot. Let's do that. That's exactly why it wasn't working. It was showing up down below in the rendering code because I had it unconditionally show us. However, I never made that same change up here, so it's late. It's late, and that's basically what I'm going to blame. Can't blame myself. So this should just give us what we want. Let's close down code. I don't need it. Okay. So this actually is lighting up the button. Kind of what we expect, right? Button is clicked. That's exactly what we expect, right? That's good. That is good. That is what we want. That is what we want to have happen. So now I can get rid of this. File changed. I can also get rid of this. What a silly bug to just be chasing for a little while. Okay, so build button flags. Do I want it to light up? I think it's probably fine if it lights up. It's probably fine. Yeah, it's probably fine. So let's actually test it kind of like end to end and make sure it sort of works. And then maybe we might call it a night because I have spent way too long on this dumb layout code. Okay, let's look at test. Let's make an edit. Oops. Test of text. Okay, cool. We have our button, and if I hover over it, you can see that it gets lit up as we expect. And if you click it, it says button clicked, which is what we expect. It's fine if the drag tab for now is just kind of like whatever. But we want that to happen. So if I open this multiple times, it does it for each one of them, which is what we want. But if I open like another file, it doesn't show the icon. Why doesn't it show the icon? Did I break somehow the batching? Oh, wait. Why is it over there? What is going on here? Huh. I broke like somehow the layout code there. Okay, well let's debug that real quick because I cannot leave that in a broken state. So layout stuff. How in the world did I end up breaking that? Because what's supposed to happen... okay. This is what happened. It's because... It is because I did not add... I did not add this. This needs to happen in order to make sure that we advance properly. So this needs to happen much later, actually. Because even when I'm dragging tabs around, which is why it takes into account this stuff here. Even when I'm dragging tabs around, I need to make sure that I add this stuff. So if the file is dirty, yeah, okay. So if not, if it's not dirty, I want to actually do the rendering. That's basically what I want. If it's not dirty. Otherwise, we need to do all this other stuff. That's why the tab was like floating there. Okay, test it again. Let's make a test. Okay, so I can have a bunch of these. I can put them together. They work. Okay, and if I add Tommel, good. Okay. That's working exactly how we expect. Cool. Well, I think we made a little bit of a dent in this thing tonight. Yeah, we got some stuff done to where we can make progress on the rest of the UI here. It's just, man, I need to wrangle the complexity of layout in the UI because it's becoming kind of a pain. I've actually made a lot of these helpers, like these basic button things, to kind of solve a lot of those problems, but I really just need it's like kind of workarounds for me not taking the time to make an actual proper flex style layout engine for Fred. And it desperately needs one because it's like it's just a pain to maintain all these UI elements mostly by hand. Some of them are pretty nice. Like the UI for this thing is probably the most modern version of everything, and this is like almost flex style layout for the simple system command. And even the same thing for this new UI element that I have here for monitoring all of the arenas around the editor. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Okay. All right, I think we're in a pretty good spot where we can just start committing some stuff and then be done with the stream for tonight. Surprisingly, like, unfortunately, like not that much code, because I spent most of the stream just fighting this dang layout code, which I should have just started with the basic button anyway. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks good. But yeah, so that Fred change for monitoring files on disk is coming. It's going to be exciting because it'll make the editor even more usable. I know it's slowly coming along to where it's getting to more and more and more usable state. Thanks to everybody, kind of hanging out in stream and helping me through the mental gymnastics of making sure I get my code correct and all the suggestions in chat. It's super awesome. It is, I think Casey Muratori once said that having a stream is like kind of having a brain upgrade because people just kind of come in with suggestions that you just didn't even think about. Like, I know Ratchet has definitely helped me out a lot in that respect. So anyway, as per usual, I'll go ahead and plug Fred itself, the editor. So that's what we've been working on. You can always check out the tech behind Fred and join our Discord and see like what we're doing, what we're building, and what this whole stream is all about. Lots of fun stuff. Anyway, okay, so I will go ahead and end the stream here. Thanks everybody for coming out, and hopefully some of you will stop by next time. Thanks.